Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. And before we get into it with our guest here today, I'd like to remind everyone that if you enjoy this content, to please give a like and subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. We have Deborah Baker on the podcast. She's coming to us all the way from the UK, where she's going to be like our 20th guest from the UK. So we are getting familiar with our guests from across the pond. But she's a figure competitor on to share her health and fitness journey and basically, talk all things health and fitness with us. But most importantly, she's our current guest. Deborah, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, since I love to torture myself, I got to ask first off, what is the weather like in the UK today?
Today it's actually really nice. It's really sunny today. We've had really bad winds, raining. But today it's been quite sunny, so it's actually a break for us because we've had a lot of torrential rain, a lot of wind and stuff. So it's quite a nice day for us today.
Well, I gotta say that at least that is nice. As you can tell, I have my shades closed, but it's still sunny out today. So this is the one time that I've lucked out too. So at least we're gonna have some good mojo on this podcast then, because we both have decent weather, I should say. But before we get into that, because I don't want to depress all the viewers that we have from the southern U.S. on, because they'll be like, "Oh my God, it's only like 35 degrees there." I'm gonna turn it off now because they I've had guests on there that they're like, oh, it's 65 degrees outside and I gotta wear a sweater when I go outside, and I was like, okay, screw you. So before we get into all that, Deborah, why don't you give us your backstory first off and what really inspired and motivated you to get in shape and how that led to where you're currently at right now?
So I have to go quite far back. So probably when I was like 14 or 15, I'm 27 now. I started off as a fashion model, and I absolutely loved it. I literally do anything for it. But basically went down like the wrong end of it. I was losing lots of weight. I really liked the way I looked at that point, and I was encouraged a lot by the industry to look, just well, I say skinny, I say slim and skinny different, but as skinny as I could. And I was so devoted to it, and I was so in love with doing that I kind of lost sight of my own health and what I really wanted and what actually made me happy. And I think I got down to about 45 kilos, 45 kilos, and I'm sitting just under 5'6". So, that's massively underweight. So I kind of, my mum sat me down and my brother at one point and said, like, look, you're losing loads of weight. You need to sort yourself out. And obviously at that age, you're not really listening to your parents or anyone around you. You're kind of like, I know what I'm doing. I don't need anyone's help, sort of stubborn, mentality. And just kept on doing it. And I got to the point where I was literally, I've spoken about this before on podcasts, but I was literally eating one meal a day. And I can remember exactly what it was. It was literally about, 150, 200 gram jacket potato, which is like just white potato, so some baked beans. I don't know if you guys have that there, and a tin of tuna, and that was it. And I'd have that midday every day. I was running loads, and I just got obsessed with looking a certain way, which was obviously quite detrimental to my health at that point because I was very, very skinny. So I stopped doing that. At that time as well, I lived in London. I was quite sort of immersed in fashion. I worked in fashion. I was modeling lots. So I was literally in that. So I took myself away. I quit my job there, moved back to Cornwall, and then I started. I studied journalism initially, and then I realised how much I actually liked exercise. So then I went into university, which you guys call college, I assume, and started studying sports science. I got my bachelor's degree in that, and then I'm halfway through my master's on that as well. But just going through all of that, I started bodybuilding around 2015, so later stages of 2015. And then I sort of realized, when you start, I was like, well, I don't really want to look too muscly because, that's sort of common, like that stereotype of, oh, I'm going to look like a man. I don't want to look that way. And I enjoyed it so much, and my physique just took to it so well. I was like, this is awesome. I'm just gonna, carry on doing what I'm doing, see where it takes me. And I competed my first year in 2016, didn't place. I prepped myself for that year. I didn't carb up properly. I had no clue what I was doing. I got shredded, but there was just no volume or density to me whatsoever because I just dieted too hard, did too much cardio. And then I sort of came back the next year, learnt more, placed second, got a qualifier to the British finals, and sort of just went on from there really. But yeah, I did. When I initially started that back in my sort of modeling days, I remember seeing a woman at the gym and I was like, she looks, I thought to myself, she looks horrible. She looks like a man. I mean, she was less muscly than what I am now. And to think, looking back on that, I'm like, actually, she looked really good. So my mindset's completely shifted from where I was back then to where I am now. But yeah, that's background and stuff. I'll talk you through like what I'm doing in a minute, I suppose, if that's what you want to know. But yeah, that's sort of where I come from, really.
Well, I gotta say, 27, you don't look a day over 26. So,
Oh, thank you very much.
no, I'm 26 myself. So, we're about the same age, and that's amazing. And it's just so fascinating. Yeah, how people do have that myth, because I'll bring it up right now because I love to bust it every time. Is that it has gotten better the last 5 years due to Instagram, but there's still so many women who have that fear that if they walk into the gym, they're gonna put on 50 pounds of muscle, and oh, they're gonna look like a man. And obviously, you had that fear when you were getting started, but how do you like to respond to that now, hearing that? Because I mean, I bet you still hear that all the time from women.
I mean, it's less so, but yes, still definitely. I mean, it's like saying to someone, if you go into a shop and you pick up, a can of food, or you pick up your shopping bag or something, have you miraculously sprouted muscles? Like, are you that hyper anabolic that you're going to look muscular? No. If that were the case, there'd be like millions of bodybuilders all over the place. It would be half the work. It wouldn't be, but it's not. Hence why there's such a small percentage of the population that do what they do and look the way they do. So, I mean, that's kind of how I that's how I demyth that, is by saying, like, think of just basic everyday things you do, picking up something that's like, I know you guys work in pounds, but maybe say something that's over £10. Have you like sprouted like a really solid bicep, or have you like front raised like something, and no, it's just not. You've got to put the work in, you've got to eat for it, you've got to sleep for it, you've literally got to put the effort in to get it. It doesn't just miraculously happen. There are individuals out there that are genetic freaks and they have the genetic makeup to achieve that, but they still work very hard, and they still have to, create the correct stimulus to get it. So it's yeah, it's just a lack of education. That's all, and I think it's just something that, like you said, slowly is gaining momentum, but it's still taking time to get it. And I mean, hopefully, like, individuals like myself and other people on social media use that platform properly to educate people. You can be fit and healthy. You don't have to look like a bodybuilder. You can still do resistance training, but be healthy, and just use it to be functional, really.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I always tell the story too. When I was in college, I had a friend who had a very heavy purse, and I told her, I was like, "You're not getting any significant muscle from lugging that thing around." And that sort of convinced her as well. But the one thing that I think impacts women, especially, so much more positively than men, and it impacts men as well, though, is that confidence boost that working out gives you. We have heard hundreds of stories on this podcast of women who have, they've been able to make life changing decisions because of it, or it's just maybe helped them become more assertive. And I say that that's the one thing that you can take from the gym and use it to impact your life in a positive way. How have you taken that confidence boost that working out's given you and use it to impact your life?
So, I mean, initially, again, going back to like that myth, I was one of those people that went straight. It sounds like a stereotype. I went straight into the cardio room and just run because, again, I was intimidated by it. I'm not an intimidated like, I don't get intimidated. I'm quite, assertive, but that did scare me, that element of that. And, I was eased into it by my partner at the time, and just fell in love with it. But in terms of transference to what I'm doing, I mean, it's given me the confidence to build my own business. I can make very, like, like, definitive decisions. I'm not umming and erring and second guessing a lot. I can, go out somewhere by myself and not feel like, I do suffer from social anxiety, but from this, I'm gonna feel a little bit more assertive in myself, and as well, it's the discipline of it as well. I think still to be like a competitor, so to be a bodybuilder and then to be a competitive bodybuilder, I think are two completely different things, because you've got to diet down for shows and stuff like that. So I think that the discipline and, like, the hard work and, the doubt that you get in that sort of instance there when you're prepping, you can transfer that across to other parts of your life. And I think, until you've experienced that, you don't really realize, what you gain from that. Not just, yes, I look shredded, but you can gain so much more from that and apply that to the rest of your life. So I mean, for me, it's completely changed my whole life, my whole mindset. So yeah, I think it's done. It's in. I would say saved my life, but it's pushed me in the right direction. That's for sure.
Well, and people just don't understand that this is so much more of a mental journey than it is a physical journey. I mean, obviously, like, people are only going to really notice the physical changes in you, or they'll be like, "Oh my God, Deborah, you look amazing. What have you been doing?" If they haven't seen you for a while, but they're not going to realize, the mental change that has occurred as well, and that's 100 times more important when it comes to just the long-lasting effects that's going to have. But I love to talk genetics on this podcast because, I mean, let's be honest, everyone's on social media. I hear this all the time, and it drives me crazy. Oh my God, I want his arms, I want her abs, I want their back, and people just do not realize that you can only be the best version of yourself. I don't know how many times I have to, like, shake people down and just be like, you do not know how that person got to that look. Like you said, there are some genetic freaks out there where, like, they were born with a 12 pack basically, and they can eat whatever they want. I have a friend like that who, he could eat 20 Snickers bars a day and he's not going to gain an ounce of fat. And, I just hope that God's playing a cruel joke on him and one day he's going to wake up, 400 pounds. But, it hasn't happened yet. So, but I am praying. Hopefully that's going to happen one of these days. But, on top of that, I mean, everyone always has that one body part when they get started that really, really takes off that they don't have to train as much. And then everyone has that one body part that just lags behind it. They have to train to oblivion when they get started. I mean, I'll give you mine first. My back, just because I had jobs all throughout college of working in warehouses where I was lifting and loading stuff into trucks, and you either got a really nice back, you quit. But I'm also 6'3", so my legs and my lower body are just absolutely shot. Where I have to be, I always make the joke I could inject pure muscle into my legs and they wouldn't gain an ounce. Don't even get me started on calves. That's the number one genetic thing. That's I could do 10,000 calf raises a day and I wouldn't gain an ounce. But what were those body parts for you when you were getting started?
What, my best ones or my worst ones?
Both.
So, I mean, believe it or not, I didn't act right. So initially, I didn't train my shoulders and I didn't train my legs. I just could not be bothered. So I wasted a year or so on that. When I did start training my shoulders, I think, from you see from my social media, my shoulders, my upper body just in general has like, I think my genetics are just better. I couldn't, if you look at old photos of me when I model, I literally have nothing at all. So it's really hard to sort of distinguish if I have had good genetics for it. But I think, creating that stimulus, I've realized, yes, my shoulders are, the best sort of body part on me, my back, arms, chest is all right. Like I don't really train that too much, but I mean, it grows. And then my lagging body part's always been my legs. Doesn't help that I skipped out for a year and a half when I first started training it. And I think just genetically, like on my mum's side, her legs are like, what women want, like long, slim legs, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that. But for bodybuilding, it's not so great. So, I've got like a femur the length of a giraffe. I've got decent calves, but I've actually brought my legs up. So if you look at my most recent stuff, I've really like brought the proportions up. So I've got an actual X frame now because my upper body was quite overpowering, and it's not that I trained it more frequently. Like I only train those body parts once a week. It's just that I think just the genetics are better. Whereas now I'm hitting my legs 3 times a week and I'm spreading that out. So that's worked. That frequency and that volume's worked for me. But like I said, skipping them out at the start didn't help, so I've kind of lost a year. But we can't always start off perfect. It's all a journey of learning what you've got to do really and what works best for you, isn't it?
Oh, it's just a huge trial and error, basically, too. I mean, that's this entire lifestyle and this entire journey. But I do got to ask now because shoulders are the number one thing from women on this podcast that say that's their struggle area. It just seems to be, if I were to do a poll, I mean, that is vastly the number one thing that they say they struggle with. So even though they did really take off for you, I mean, I always tell people, genetics aside, you still have to put the work in. So what does a shoulder workout look like for you? Because I would get killed in the comments down below if I didn't ask you that. They'd be like, Ryan, why didn't you ask her what her shoulders were doing? I've been trying to look like this. I've been trying to get my good shoulders for my whole entire life.
So, I mean, I like doing a lot of volume-based stuff. So to start with as well, when I first ever started training shoulders, I would spend, a ridiculous, just because I absolutely love training them as well. I'd probably spend like an hour and a half on them. This is back when I first started. And now I'm spending like 45 minutes an hour, but that's including like some arms and stuff and then some abs as well. So I shifted around the structure. So I used to always be in pressing first. I used to do pressing first, then isolation work, and just follow on through that. Now what I do is I do isolation first. So I'll do a ton of lateral raises first, really lightweight, really light load, and just blast them, like 25, 30 reps. Then I'll go into some feeder sets for my shoulder press, and then I'll do like one working set. So that's like between like 10 and 12 reps. Like my shoulders are strong. Obviously, I'm in prep now, but I mean, normally I'm pressing, like my best is like, what was it? 32 and a half kilos. So I don't know what that is in pounds. That's per side.
It's a lot, yeah.
So yeah, like that. I got that for like 8 reps in this off season gone. So they're strong. But I think, so sorry. So that's the pressing. I'll go into that in a minute. And then I'll do some front raises, just a couple of sets to those because I don't want them to overpower too much. Because when you see people that have like their shoulders, they have a lot front delt as well from doing chest, and then they lack the rear delt. So it's about keeping that like 3D look on there as well. And then I just do literally some like rear flies with dumbbells and some rear flies on like the pec deck. Maybe some face pulls as well, but ensure that I'm hitting them from a point of the rear delt and not in, like pulling in trap, because I see so many people doing them. They're doing too much trap work with that. But yeah, I mean, that's how I do it. I think a lot of people that want to get that cap on them, especially, they're so focused on, yes, it's great having shoulder strength, which we get through pressing and everything else. But for aesthetic reasons and in bodybuilding, you want to create like a stimulus to get that cap on there. So that we need that, especially like figure, physique, anything like that, even bikini, you need the cap. So, prioritizing like lateral raises, doing variations of lateral raises, really good. Like cuff lateral raises on the cables. You can do like leaning lateral raises, one arm with a dumbbell or a cable behind and front. So it's about finding that angle as well where you most feel it. So I could tell you to do it the way I do it, where I most feel it, but that's my mechanics and the way it works for me. Whereas for someone else, they might feel it doing a different variation. But definitely prioritize those lateral raises. Keep pressing in there, of course, but don't have that as your main scope at the start. That's what I found personally, and that's what's helped mine grow more. So I mean, they've grown even more since the last time I stepped on stage. So yeah, and it's just about obviously creating stimulus and just not being like, oh, okay, I've done 10 reps, done. You need to make sure that you are working them properly and not just ticking off boxes for the sake of it.
And I love that you brought up that there's more than one part to the shoulder, because that's one thing that a lot of people do not understand as well. When I hear this all the time, where people are like, "Oh, I just want to go and work out my shoulders today," because they've been complaining about how their shoulders haven't taken off, and I go, "Oh, well, what part are you playing on training?" And then they take a second pause and they just go, "Oh, my shoulders. I'm just gonna work shoulders." And I was like, "Oh, your front, medial, or your rear?" And then they're just like, "Oh, no, I'm just gonna do some shoulder raises or some side raises." And I was like, "Oh, okay, well." Then I kind of got to educate them on like, hey, you're gonna get one thing bigger than the next, and it's got to be even proportion. So yeah, that's awesome. But I love to talk also nutrition on this podcast, because it's 80 to 90% of this lifestyle. And I mean, oh my God, so many people do not understand that, where they think that they can go to the gym and as long as I get my workout in, I'll be fine. It's like, yeah, you'll see some changes, but if you don't have that proper nutrition, you're not going to see vastly the amount of changes that you would see if you didn't follow that right nutrition. So what were some of the bigger nutritional changes that you first made when you were getting started? And obviously it's an ever evolving cycle. So how has your nutrition changed as you put on more muscle and gotten more into the sport?
So, like, first of all, I would always say it's 100% training and 100% nutrition. Just because, like, there's those things floating around. It's like people are like, oh, it's like 20% training, 80%. That's not me having a go at you. I'm just saying you've got to be like on the dot with both of them, and you can have like off-plan meals in there if you want to have a burger or something from time to time, no problem. Like in my off season, I eat my main meals and I'm eating a lot. And if I can fit something else in there that I want, I'll eat it. I won't have anyone telling me that I can't eat it because I love food. I absolutely love food. So I mean, initially that transition from like model life to there, it was about just increasing caloric intake because I was eating literally, I was barely eating anything. I'd say I was scraping 600-700 calories a day, which is ridiculous. So obviously building that back up, and I had a fear of increasing food. So again, that took time, and I was lean for quite a while. I still have like sort of like abs as such, but I went again, like when people start, you read stuff, you're like, oh, let's do this. That I was on this stupid chicken and rice and broccoli to death, didn't care, just did it. Then I was doing things like blending like shakes. So my partner at the time, we were trying to get the calories in, so we'd do like get a blender out, get some oats. What that's oatmeal, you guys call it, don't you? Yeah, so I'm just doing it so clarify for your American
Oh,
viewers.
yeah, no problem at all. We appreciate that. Yeah, because sometimes we've had so many guests that talk about either like in pounds or in kilograms, and then we're just like, what? And then I got to do the stuff down below. So, no, we appreciate that. And
So
yeah,
I've got American clients and stuff,
yeah,
so I
yeah.
try and
Not a
sort of
problem.
translate it. So yes, I'd have oats in there. I'd have peanut butter in there. I would put some protein powder, eggs. It was. I think by the time we'd finished it, we calculated it was over 1,000 calories. We blend that up and drink that. Oh, awful! Like looking back on it, I was like, I don't know how I did that. And then I would just eat like the chicken and rice stuff. So that was in my first like year and a half. And then obviously as I went through, I started evolving my nutrition. I'm dairy intolerant, so I had to sort of be cautious of that because, again, I don't want to cause unnecessary inflammation, bloating, feel sick, and then that causes like it's really difficult to uptake more nutrients when you're in like an inflammatory sort of state. So I just sort of shifted things around. Then I started being like, right, do you know what? I'm not having just chicken and rice. I'm gonna have fish in there. I'm gonna have eggs. I'm gonna have beef. So I just got a mixture of things in there and evolved through. Then I started doing things like I wasn't really eating at good times before training as well. So I wouldn't time my training, my pre-workout food, my post-workout food. That was kind of slack back then as well. So obviously I've refined that over the years. I know that if I'm on a leg day and I'm on off season, I've got a big meal to get in. I'm not going to have that half an hour before because then I'll be throwing it up if I, if I don't. So I need that amount of time to digest that. I know about getting my post-workout meals in and just spreading them out throughout the day. Not because you know, you become like your metabolic rate will change. That's just most convenient for me to spread them out because I don't want to eat, huge meals and bloat myself out. So, I mean, at the minute, I don't know if you want to know what I'm eating at the minute.
Yeah, sure.
'Cause I'm in prep. So I'm at carb cycling at the moment. So because my shows have just been changed because of a lockdown and stuff. I don't know if you want me to go into this in a minute because obviously it's still lockdown, but I've done a couple of high carb days because my show dates have been pushed back. So I've done a couple of high carb days to sort of refuel myself, pulled off the cardio a little bit, and then we're going to sort of push it back up. But low carb days I'm on now are literally just egg whites and a couple of eggs in the morning. So that's one meal one. Then I have chicken and some greens. I have that 3 times. Then I'll have with one of those meals, I have 100 grams of rice pre-workout, and then post-workout, I have turkey mince with white potato, so like 150 grams of white potato, greens, and then eggs and greens before bed, and that's literally my meals for low days, really, which is mostly what I'm doing at the minute until I'm told by my coach, right, let's chuck in a high day, get things fired up again.
That's how. Well, I gotta apologize first of all because I think us as Americans should apologize that we still use the metric system out of all the other places in the world. So making it hard for everyone else to do because I've had Canadians, Finland, all those countries on, and I gotta remember every single time it's like they do not do our measurements. So, but no, that's incredible. Yeah, I mean the whole nutrition thing. I mean that's a podcast in and of itself. That that's gonna be like a 3-hour podcast that I could do just on that alone. But the most important thing in this lifestyle, and probably the hardest thing for so many people that I would have never understood until I really got into the lifestyle is, that for so many of these guests, posing is the hardest thing for them. It's harder than your nutrition. It's harder than your working out. I would have never guessed it in a million years, but I like to compare it now to being a perfect driver where you can be a great driver. You can never be a perfect driver. You can be a great poser. You can never be a perfect poser. It's always ever evolving. What has your experience with posing been like?
So I'm self-taught. I've had a couple of sessions from people recently because I'm trying to obviously get my pro card this year, so I really need to fine tune stuff. So I'm self-taught. My first show, my posing, it was, looking back on it, I've looked at my pictures, it was atrocious. It was awful. I'm like sharp elbows, I've got things flaying like things where they shouldn't be, and that's normal and that's part of the process. But I practice literally every day. I'll practice in the morning, I'll do like 10-15 minutes, so like 3 rounds. Then I'll do post workout as well. And I'm always, like you said, I'm always refining and evolving it to find what suits me because, you know, you can watch someone that's posing and their physique looks really good in that pose. Then you try to emulate that yourself, probably not going to look as good because you don't have their body parts, you don't have their musculature. So you have to find really like look and find what poses work best for you. That's why sometimes it's good to have someone step in to help you. But I mean, the majority of the stuff I've done myself. Like I said, just practice, practice, practice. Because the problem is people, they look great and they have this great physique, and then they, like you said, they come onto stage and they're trying to present that, and they don't know how to pose, and they're going to stick out like a sore thumb, and not even in a good way, and they could sort of miss out on potentially winning because they're not able to showcase all the hard work that they've put in. So it's really important. Like, I do practice with a mirror, and then I take the mirror away at some points as well, because when you're on stage, you don't know, you can't see what you're looking like. All you can go by gauging is how it feels to be in that pose. So that's what I do. And that's what I found works best for me. Like, I think my posing is like a lot better. Like, it's not, don't get me wrong, it's not pro standard. Well, I don't think it is anyway, but it's a lot better. And like, I'm quite happy with my posing. Like, I help others pose as well. So I think I've done pretty well with it. It's just like a few things. Like, everyone's got their Achilles. Like, my Achilles, even though my back's really good, is that rear pose. It is just so difficult to get into that. I've refined it and made it better. But there's still a couple of tweaks in it, like I know I can make. And that, like I said, that's just something that comes over time. You've got to have the mobility as well to be able to get into some of those poses, and hold them as well. Like, you imagine being on stage, dehydrated, you're hot, you're tired, and you've got to hold a pose, and you've not conditioned your body to hold a pose that long. It's going to show. You're going to be wobbling all over the place. You're going to get cramps. You're going to look awful. So you just need to make sure that you start as soon as you know you want to compete. Start posing. Doesn't matter if you're in off season and you can't see every striation and every muscle popping out. Get going. You've got to start, because you leave it 4 weeks out, you're done. Like, you're not gonna be able to do anything with it.
We've heard so many first timers say that they started posing like a couple of weeks ahead of time, and I cringe every single time I hear that, where I'm just like, oh my god, that must not have turned out so well. But A pose that we hear that, especially with figure competitors, is one that a lot of people struggle with at first, is that lat spread, because, that's a pose, to get those lats to flare, that takes forever for so many people. And then you always have those, few lucky people where, they're just basically born where they can do that. It turns out fine. But how long did that take you to develop that pose? Because that's really the one pose that I think really differentiates a lot of people is, that lat spread, if you can do it well or not.
Yeah, so I mean, that took me. I mean, up and even when I can last competed in 2019, like I can lat spread really well, and like this year it looks even bigger, probably because I've grown my lats even more. But it, I could only at one time activate my right lat. I could only do that, and it was so frustrating that I couldn't get my left one going as well. So I kind of learned independently, so side by side, unilaterally, and then I pulled them in together. But it took me a long time. I think it took me a good 2, maybe 2.5 years to get that properly out. And I mean, even looking back when I competed in like 2017 to where I was in like 2019, my lats, I didn't have the same control over them then. It's just one of those things you've got to practice. You've got to make sure that when you're in the gym, you're actually building that connection up in there as well and activating them in the gym. Because, if you don't know what you're doing, because a lot of gals, what they'll tend to do is they'll shrug like this, and then they've completely lost the roundness of their shoulders, their lats. Like when you pull them out, you want it to stack on top of your lat. So you've got, again, you can increase that cap there. What they're doing a lot of the time, they're doing this and then they're losing their neck, or they'll pull their arms and elbows up too high and then they've lost this cap here. So you'll see them doing this. So it's all about obviously making sure that you get everything popping in properly. So it does take time, and that's the problem. I'll have people say that, "Oh, I can't get myself looking like you do." And I'm like, "Well, I've been doing this nearly 6 years." I was like, you got to understand, you're just seeing me, at not the end, but a lot further along into where I am. And you're basing your success and your progress on someone else. Like, you can't do that. You know, First of all, this isn't me being harsh. You might not even have the muscle there to be able to do it yet. So you got to have the muscle and be able to actually activate them at the same time. They're just not, they're not doing like the proper protraction and like retracting the shoulder blades either. So they don't understand. It's just something you got to practice. And I was there. I looked awful when I did my first pose, and absolutely awful.
I mean, everyone's gone through that. I think where they do that first posing session, they're like, "Oh my god, I got a lot of work to do." That's really the moment of truth that they realize that, hey, I've really, got a lot of work ahead of me. But another myth and stereotype that I love to talk about is that, so many people do not understand that look that you present on stage, that is not a sustainable look. You're not going to be able to look like that 365 days a year. See, we get that reaction every single time, but it's just how many times in the general public I hear that where they're just like, "Oh, with the amount that they work out, they should be able to maintain that look." And I think it's because people watch shows like Biggest Loser where people go on, they lose the significant amount of weight, and that sometimes they're able to keep it off, and people just assume that, bodybuilders, they work out even harder than that, so they should be able to maintain that look, but they don't know all the manipulations that you've done with your body throughout the contest prep, and, to get to that show, all the water manipulation, carbs, everything that goes into this show. What was that like for you when you first realized that, like, hey, this look that I presented on stage, I'm not going to be able to maintain it. I am going to have to put on some weight. And has it gotten easier for you to accept that as your career has gone on?
I didn't care, because two reasons why is, number one, it's all part of the process. You can't, like you said, you can't sustain that for like all year round. If you want to get better and progress, you've got to eat. You've got to be in a surplus. Like some people can eat tons and have a super good competition. They can have abs on show, get bigger, whatnot. Fine. Some people can't do that, and I think you have to be accepting of the body type that you have, and the fact that, if you want to progress and do well in that, and this is your career, you've got to just accept it. And second of all, like I said to you before, I love food. I try my best to rebound off it well, because it can actually be quite painful and quite uncomfortable if you go from being shredded to forcing all this stuff in your body. Like I've done that a couple of times, and you go eating all this stuff, you bloat out, you're in agony, you're holding loads of water, like you get like a lot of water retention. It can be really painful as well. And you puff up, you don't look good. It'll go, but it's not the best way to do it. Like, you remember how much you put your body through. You want to kind of reverse out of it the best you can. Like I normally do like a couple of 2 or 3 days off plan completely, let my body relax. I normally get all my fluids back in first, and then sort of ease the food in. But I do that, and then I kind of reverse out and still stick to structure. And then in the off season, like I said, if I can fit more food in, I'm gonna eat it. I don't care. I enjoy my food. I always get into shape on shows. Like condition, yes, is one of my Achilles, but again, I don't come in out of shape. I just need to be more conditioned. But I know I can get the weight off. It's not like I'm fat. I'm probably not. I'll have people say to me stuff like, "I like you the way you look when you're in prep, and I don't really like the way you look when you're in off season." That's fair enough, but I actually like the way I look in off season. I like being a little bit like softer. I like how it being a little bit more feminine, and like, not that this is unfeminine, but I can wear things that look a bit more feminine. I've got more shape. I've got more of a bum. Like my ass just goes. Like anyone in prep, you get a flat butt. I want my butt back, So it's not really. I don't care. I can go out and I can have a meal with someone if I want to eat. You know, a few more calories, I can do it. So for me, it's not like I'm letting loose, but I can be slightly more relaxed, but still keep on plan to where I want to be, and compete again. So yeah, it's not like you stop training. I think that's another thing as well. People think when you say off season, they're like, "Oh, so you're going to stop training now?" I'm like, "No, I'm going to train even harder." So I've got to get better. I was like, "No."
Yeah, no, that's another thing that people just do not understand. And I love that you brought that up. And before we get into the coronavirus, I mean, my favorite question to ask is because let's be honest, you're not the average looking 27-year-old woman. Like, if you were to walk out in public dressed the way that you are right now, you sort of become like a mini celebrity where, I mean, you draw people's attention where it's just when they see something that's not of their normal, they're just like, oh, wow, that's fascinating. And, I just find that so stimulating for my mind. Just like, how are you able to live like that? Because I can remember when I was in better shape when I was in college, when I didn't have a job and, doing this podcast and all this stuff. I still work out and stuff, but I mean, I can remember girls at bars just coming up and feeling my arms and just being like, let's be honest, it was the college years. I'd pump it up for them a little bit, but that's the college years, Ryan Johnson. That's a little bit different than it is right now. But what's this whole journey been like for you, just sort of dealing with that, attention that you might get when you're out in public? Has it been something that you're easily able to transition into, or has it been one thing that you've struggled with, or what's the overall vibe been like for you, just realizing that, like, hey, if I'm out in public, I am going to get, a little bit more attention than I would have, previous to this.
I mean, so like I said before, I do suffer from social anxiety a little bit. So I've been to down here in Cornwall, in this part of the UK, it's more, well, there's not many of us down here as a breed of body, but there's not many of us down here, so people are going to look anyway. I don't like people, like, I don't like having loads of attention drawn to me, if that makes sense. When I go out shopping, it's like I used to go out shopping in a vest top. If it's really hot, I'll still go out in a vest top. But I do get everyone staring at me. Obviously, some are like shooting stuff. I've walked past people, and I've literally had people like, "Oh, that's disgusting!" Like they're morbidly obese, and I'm like, "Well, okay, fine." I'm not walking past them and saying that to them because I'm not that type of person. That's your lifestyle choice. If that's the way you want to look, same goes for me. And then I'll have other people that are like, "Oh man, you look really cool," and this and that. And it's fine. Neither of them affect me, but I don't actually like people staring at me. It's one of those things I don't like. And I've had people like come up and like, "Oh, can I touch your bicep?" and do this. I'm like, "No, I'm not an inanimate object. So I don't want you touching me. I don't like people in my personal space either." I don't, I don't tend to like it too much. If I went to a convention or something and I was like this, famous bodybuilder, fine, but I don't really like people like staring at me. So now when I go out, it's cold here anyway, but I tend to cover up more just because I don't want people looking at me so much. It makes me feel a little bit anxious, if that makes sense.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I believe it or not, I mean, you probably couldn't tell by talking to me. I have at times suffered from social anxiety as well. For me, it was more of, like pitching in baseball because all the eyes were literally on you and it was everything. So yeah, I totally understand that. And yeah, there's so many people, and plus there's people that are going to, try to take advantage of like the perceived that just because you seem that you're in shape that they can do stuff. And yeah, I totally understand that. So and I've heard some stories on here too where it's like, yeah, I can totally understand why some people would be reserved with that. And yeah, more power to you for being able to do that. And it's yeah, I just think it's just so fascinating, when you make these changes to your body, how much more people invest their time in looking at you and stuff like that. It's fascinates me. But now we get into the big elephant in the room, the coronavirus, because it's been one thing that's impacted our lives in more ways than we can ever imagine. You especially being in the UK, where I mean, they've shut down until April. The gyms are closed again. So April 12th, yeah, you guys already do you have like a calendar where you're crossing off the days, basically just waiting?
A mental calendar,
A
yeah,
mental
definitely.
calendar,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
my clients are the same as well because obviously the majority of them are training from home, so we're all getting through it. And the thing is, like, it's nice for them to have someone look after them as well and like have each other in the team. So yeah, and I mean we're all doing it together. So it's like if I'm dieting down and a few of them are losing weight and stuff as well, it's good for them to have like someone to refer to, if you know what I mean.
So how have you been doing this whole prep, without any gyms, or do you have like someone's gym that lets you come in, or do you have to do all this stuff at home? How have you been successfully doing a prep while your gyms have been shut down?
So I do have equipment at home. I've been borrowing stuff as well and going to like certain areas to use machines. So I'm not really going to tell where
Oh, well,
because
yeah, obviously, but yeah,
kind of
yeah.
illegal, but
I love how gyms have basically become like speakeasies now when they've been like shutting down, where it's like you got to know someone, and then they let you in. But yeah, that's great. And how have you been able to sort of keep this mental focus? Because I saw one of your posts where like, yeah, one of your shows just got delayed and you were getting ready for that show, so now you got to change up, your cardio, and now you got to change up your diet just a little bit. How have you been able to keep this, all of it together mentally? Because for me, I'm one of those people where if I'm getting ready and if I was ever prepping, because you know how hard it is for me to prep for anything when it comes to just that diet part, I would lose my mind if it got delayed and I was like, I went through all that so how have you been able mentally to sort of keep this positive mindset, knowing that your show could get delayed, or knowing that there could be no delay, but just dealing with that and just still being able to go through this and prep properly?
so I mean, I had I think it was about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I had like a wobble. And I had a day where I literally just devoured loads of food. And I felt like crap from it. Let my coach know. I was like, right, I've done this. Didn't really do any damage at all, to be fair, because I was on loads of low days, so it was fine. But not something I wanted to do, to be honest, because I've never really done that before. But I think it was, I got a lot of stuff going on. Like one of my dogs was in hospital as well for a little bit. So, and like my dog's my life. So, I had all this stuff sort of accumulating, and yeah, that kind of got to me. But I mean, now I'm fine with the shows being delayed. So I was meant to compete on the 13th of March. So this is for IFBB Two Bros. I don't know if you're familiar with those. On the 13th of March, so that was a regional qualifier, and then I was meant to do the 28th of March, which is a pro qualifier. So my aim is to get my pro card, and they moved the regional qualifier to the 29th of March, and then they moved the pro qualifier all the way to May. So in my eyes, I was like, right, I'm like 2.5 weeks out now, so it would have been 5 weeks now. So they've got another one on April 18th, and then obviously the pro qualifiers on May 2nd. So I thought, right, why don't I just give myself more time to diet, do the April qualifier, then I've got 2 weeks between that and then the pro qualifier, which to me makes more sense because I don't want to do the one at the end of March, hold that condition for a little bit, and then, well, for like 4, 6 weeks, whatever it is, and then going again. I'd rather do the regional and then hold for 2 weeks, get better, and then go into the pro. So I know exactly what I'm sort of playing with there. So it's not too long of a hold, if that makes sense. I feel like I'm getting better condition. I've got more time, so kind of knew it was going to get pushed either way. I could have done the March one later on, but I just feel, I'm going to do better if I do the one in April and then go on to the one in May.
And that's a great mindset to have too, because like I said, I would have probably struggled with that a little bit more. But now my ultimate trigger word is cardio. I hate it more than life itself. I mean, and when I say cardio, I mean like actually running. Like I'm one of those people, I could walk on a treadmill for like 80 minutes, and I'd be fine. And I do that on days when I'm on my off days or stuff. But what is your relationship with cardio like? Because people do not understand, a lot of them that I've had on for the first time, that when you start bodybuilding, cardio unfortunately becomes, if not a friend, an acquaintance of you, where you are constantly having to do it. Even in off season, some people might still be doing it, but especially in prep, what is your current relationship with cardio like? Because I know for bodybuilding that is a touchy subject for some people, where even just saying the word cardio, they have a little bit of shiver going down their spine.
I don't mind it at all. Like I used to come from a running background. That's what I used to do, but I don't run. I literally just do like like spinning, cycling, or I like go on like a stairmaster. Not at the minute 'cause I've not got access to one, but or a treadmill or something like that. So and then I'm doing steps as well. So I mean, around here it's really like there's loads of hills and stuff, so it's quite hard work. But I mean, like I don't actually mind it. I don't mind it at all. I still do it in my off season as well. Like you said, it's good, just good for overall fitness. It's good for recovery, shuttling nutrients around. So it's beneficial to keep it in all year round. But you don't want to be doing excessive amounts of it in your off season, because then it leaves you nothing to play with when you're cutting down. So I mean, I just keep myself fit and healthy really, and just keep it integrated in their off season. I don't really mind it now at all. Literally, I wake up in the morning. I'm like, right, I've got my 60 minutes fasted cardio to do. It's been reduced down a little bit now, but and then I'm on it. I'm done. It's my routine now. So I quickly become accustomed to the routine that I have to do for that, and it doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah, and that's great, and for me too. Yeah, I mean, and I do have to admit that there are so many positive health things that come with it. I mean, it's good for your heart, it's good for everything. So if anyone's looking to get started, I always tell them to start going on walks and whatnot, and that's a really great way to get started. But now we go to the $1 million question, where if someone were to walk up to you and say, Deborah, we made the decision, you can change one thing about the sport of bodybuilding, and everyone would go along with it. What would be one thing that you would like to see changed?
What do you mean if you could get like a physiological like you could look the same without it?
Or like just the sport in general. Like if you could change like one rule in the sport, or if you could change one thing about, like the lifestyle, and like everyone would have to go along with it. So like some people would say like, oh, uh like I'll give an example. Like some people are like, oh, equal pay for the men and women, or like more balanced judging system, where like if you go to one show one day and they say they want a bit more of a leaner look, and then you go to a show the very next day and they're like, oh, we want a little bit more of a fuller look, then or just stuff like that. So like if you could change one aspect about the sport, what would be one thing that you would like to see changed?
I don't know. I think the equal pay thing. Like I think I've seen like a lot of that on Instagram recently. I think that's actually quite a good point. Like I think they're pros. They win their class. They should all have the same sort of prize money. But um, I don't know. I think that maybe like do like a crossover. So like all classes, so like figure, physique, bikini, whatever, all actually going against each other, and then the best physique from there wins. I know they're completely different categories, but that would be quite a cool thing to see. Same with like men's categories.
I was gonna say it would be kind of hard to pick a bikini girl over a physique girl though. If you're going for if you're it would be hard, but yeah, yeah. But no, I totally get what you're saying though. Like I totally understand, and that's another thing. Like with judging too, where me being 6'3", I've had some 6-footers on the podcast, and it's like it is hard to tell me that you can judge properly someone who's 5 foot tall as opposed to someone who's 6 feet tall when they're standing next to each other. That's another thing too. It's like if you could change that and like get height classes, because I know for pros they don't have height classes, but for amateurs they do. For at least in the States, that's how they have
Yeah,
it. But
so I'm in a height class. So we've got like A, B, C, D figure. So I'm in like C. So yeah, you do have different ones, and then they draw each winner and then put them in the overall. And I mean, like I've been in my class. I did go into a IFBB show in 2018. And I'm like, well, I said just under 5'6", and then I was against someone that was like 6 foot something. Like, some people that are that tall look brilliant, some don't. Like it depends again on their genetics and stuff like that, doesn't it? So I mean, I've competed against girls that are like 5'2", and they're so condensed. They look brilliant, but I don't think it's really an excuse. If they look good, they look good. If you look bad, you look bad, don't you? So it's
oh,
probably just
absolutely. I mean, I always said the thing, unless you're like 7 feet tall and that person's like 5 feet tall, then you actually have like a legitimate complaint. Because like I would say, if you can dribble them like a basketball, really, because you're that much taller than them, then you might have a little bit of a say in that. But yeah, that's awesome. And before we wrap things up here, I was watching this new show on Apple Plus, and it's called Ted Lasso, where it's about an American who goes and coaches uh UK football, or soccer, I should say, for my American guests in the UK, and it's just all about like all the cultural differences that he sees in the UK as opposed to the US. And one thing that I found fascinating is that when they say someone looks fit over there, it doesn't mean necessarily that they look like they're in shape, or that they're like in. So could you explain to the US people, because I saw that and they're like, oh, the person's like, oh, she looks really fit in that picture, and then it's like she's not really that in shape, but like, so could you explain to the Americans here what fit actually kind of means in the UK when someone says like you look fit? Because I'm afraid if I went over there, I'd be called fit way too many times, and I'd be like, "Oh, I'm really looking shredded. Then I'm looking like I'm really in shape now."
yeah. You've got like like fitness. Like
Yeah.
so, if you've got someone looks fit, like you might think, oh, athletic fitness, they look great. But when we say if someone looks fit, it basically means they look like that you're attracted to them. They look sexy. They look, like, oh, they're like, see someone walking down the street, say, oh, like they're fit. But I wouldn't actually say that. That's more so of like what someone a teenager would say. I did used to say it, but not anymore. I'll be like, or you can say like, oh, they're hot, or they look nice, or like they're dish. You can say something like, oh, they're dishy, or do you know what I mean? Depends on who you are, where you come from. But we've got loads of weird stuff we say.
Well, that's the one thing that really got me, because they're like, "Oh yeah, she looks fit," and I was like, "Okay, yeah." So again, everyone, if they say you look fit, yeah.
They're good. It means they're good looking,
Yeah,
basically. It
yeah, good
means
looking,
you're
basically. Yeah, yeah. So you could say, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's another. And I just wanted to point that out there, because yeah, there's so many differences between the U.S. and especially when it comes to grammar, where it's that's great. But again, and Deborah, is there anyone that you'd like to give a shout out to before we wrap things up?
I mean, I'd probably give a shout out to all my family for putting up with me during prep, and all my friends, and just generally like people that follow me on Instagram. It's quite and like support me. It's quite strange to have like such a to be able to like, I'd hate anyone to call me an influencer, but for me to influence and inspire people is quite nice. And the messages I get from people, so it's nice to know that I do have an effect on other people. And obviously, like my support network, my coach, everyone that helps me out is, yeah, it's nice to have a good support network basically. And for yourself for having me on your podcast.
Oh, well, absolutely. And I gotta say, yeah, even for me too, just getting the handful of messages I get a day of people just being like, "Oh my God, thanks for doing what you do for the sports." Yeah, it humbles you and it really makes you feel great. And again, you guys, we cannot thank Deborah enough for coming on the podcast. And I'll leave a link to her Instagram page down below. Buyer beware, you will get inspired. Stop eating those Twinkies and get off that couch and start working out. And
We don't have
27.
to.
Yeah, yeah. Well, hey, yeah, I mean, trust me, when you want to talk about fat foods, you're talking to an American here, okay? Basically, where I wish I had one of my cups that I used to have as an example, a jumbo size cup that they would give you like at convenience stores that was literally like, I couldn't even put it into frame how tall it is. So yeah, that's a whole nother thing. Just the portion size that we have here is ridiculous. So before I wrap up, there's a place called Smash Burger here, and literally their hamburgers are so big that they're off of the bun and onto the plate when they give it to you. So yeah.
You should see our portion size in here. Like I've watched videos of like your McDonald's and our
Yep.
McDonald's. The portion sizes are way off. You've got way more on your menus than what we do. And yeah, it's just rubbish. Like that one of my things this year is to go to America, like even if it's a holiday, not maybe compete and see where I go, but definitely it's a holiday and I want to go into an American diner and I want the pancakes and the bacon and I want a burger that's actually the size of my head and I want to eat like I want to
Okay.
try all the
So you need to write this down because it's an international food chain and it's the best burgers. Five Guys Burgers and Fries. I think they actually have them in the UK, but you got to have them in the US because they're even better here. And
Okay.
yeah, you got to have them here. And if there is a smash burger around you, the best chocolate shake you will ever have. Like I only allow it once a month. I allow myself to go there, and that's my if I get all my workouts in and I do everything, then I allow myself to have one of those. I literally, my mouth is almost watering even talking about that
Make
right
me
now.
how do you think I feel? I'm in
Oh
prep
my
and
God.
you're
I
talking
feel
about
bad. I feel bad for announcing now. So everyone, we'll wrap it up now because I don't want her to like all of a sudden to start dreaming food, which I bet she already does enough as is. But again, you guys go and give Deborah a follow. I really really appreciate it, and thank you again so much for coming on and sharing your journey. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Well, this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing out. Have a great day, everyone.